welcome to Future Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing in our Cloud Services Business Unit. And today I'm joined by Sashi. Sashi, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, Guy. I am Sachi, and I am Technical Product Marketing Manager at for Tanzu products for VMWare Cloud Director.
Awesome, awesome. So Cloud Director, very close to my heart, and I'm so glad to have you here to explain Tanzu a bit more to me and the people watching this session today, because Tanzu has been like a lot of noise over the last couple of years, and we've seen it kind of grow and grow in importance in VMware. And now, as of where are we now? June 2021, it's actually in the portfolio for cloud providers to use, right?
Yep, that is correct. It's GA now.
Yeah, so cloud Tanzu Basic specifically, right? And that's if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is Tanzu TKG, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid for vSphere and multi-cloud. So TKGS and TKGM.
That is correct.
Excellent, excellent. Right, so now we're going to dive into the details. So firstly, thank you very much for joining us today. We wanted to get this opportunity to spend some time with you, Sashi, to walk through what's new with VCD and Tanzu and 10.2.2 of VCD. And I also wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about where a provider should use container service extension versus not use container service extension. Because obviously, Tanzu is at the vSphere kind of runtime level, is now a first-class citizen in VCD, and hence doesn't need CSE, but there's some parts that you might actually want to use CSE. We'll cover that hopefully, or you'll be able to explain it to me.
That's the first thing we are going to cover.
Excellent. All right, well, let's dive into it. I think you got some slides you wanted to show.
Right now, Tanzu Basic is available for VCPP, and we are offering multiple solutions for Kubernetes-as-a-service. First one is container service extension, which is open source project, but we provide support for container service extension as for container service extension, and we provide open source, provide a runtime for Kubernetes clusters, which are the templates are open source today. The second row you see is TKGS, which is Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, which is based on vSphere with Kubernetes. And currently that is supported with VCD release 10.2.2. And it connects to vSphere infrastructure, which has a supervisor cluster created, workload management enabled. And we can consume or provide TKGS as runtime on VMware Cloud Director. And the last addition we have is TKGM. M stands for multi-cloud. And that is used in conjunction with container service extension today. It requires CSE version 3.03, and it is multi-cloud solution, but right now with Tanzu Basic, we only provide support, or the integration is limited to on-prem vSphere today. So
okay, so you're looking at, even though it's multi-cloud, it's actually multi-VCD based cloud, not any other clouds at this time.
Yes, with Tanzu Basic, we support a single cloud, which is vSphere.
Got it, got it. And Tanzu Basic contains TKGS, and actually, I don't think TKGM is actually a part of Tanzu Standard, is that not right? But it's actually been pulled into Basic for service providers?
That is correct. So as we are opening other opportunities for Tanzu Standard as well, so we have started our work and we are integrating TKGM upfront. So as we dive into further evolution of Tanzu, we can start using TKGM in future. So this is the first step towards it.
Brilliant.
And
okay.
That's why we are supporting it with vSphere today.
Okay. And so it looks like from a CSE perspective then, that with TKGS, you don't need CSE.
Yes, so only TKGS doesn't require CSC server installation. And starting from VCD version 10.2, we don't have to install any UI plugin as well. So for any of these, all you have to do is through VMware Cloud Director, you go navigate to extensions and then you enable the UI plugin from VMware Cloud Director directly. So we don't have to install UI plugin at all now. But
Okay.
for CSE, like upstream Kubernetes support, we need CSE server. Yes. For TKGM today, we will need CSE server. That is correct, but not for TKGS.
Okay. And in terms of what the UI plugin would provide in addition to kind of the centralized API for CSE, that's things like just the cluster management, lifecycle management to a certain extent, upgrade of clusters, that type of thing.
That is correct. Through UI, what you can do is you can provision, delete, manage lifecycle of the cluster. You can scale the cluster through VMware Cloud Director, be it provider UI or it is, if it's enabled for the customer organization, you can do it through the customer organization. Yes.
So would you say then that the UI CSE component is more for kind of tenant admins who are setting up and managing environments for developers, whereas the API then allows developers to go and do their own operations using API commands?
That is correct.
Okay, and so everything is coming with ingress load balancing, which is great to see.
Yep.
And then Kubernetes templates, provider managed K8 templates. Okay, so that's something the provider delivers and manages. What's the VMware content library? What does that mean?
So TKGS, when we enable workload management on vSphere infrastructure, VMware provides managed templates of TKG, and that is provided through the content library. So once you set up the content library in the vSphere infrastructure, we don't have to go and the synchronization of those is taken care by the content library itself. And all the templates will have specific set of extensions like CNI as Entria, CSI, and then some specific extensions that's going to communicate to the supervisor cluster. So everything is set up through the content library.
And is that content library a one-off thing for a specific version of TKG, or is it something that's constantly updated by VMware?
That will be updated by VMware. So right now, if you see the user experience, once you set up the workload management, we don't have to go and synchronize the library. We don't have to download those specific updates at all. Like it's taken care through the content library.
So then, and then we're going to talk about this later, but in terms of the networking and the network isolation that you're going to put on organizations when they're sharing gateways, and that's obviously a bit of natting and routing out to be able to reach the content library and sync down the latest content from VMware.
Yeah, we will see that. So for container service extension, just to we'll cover this slide. So for container service extension, CNI plugin is Weave today. TKGS and TKGM currently uses Entria as a CNI plugin by default. As a customer, you can change it to Calico, but you have better support using Entria because it's through VMware. The second topic is supported vSphere versions. So TKGS requires vSphere 7, and our latest support with VMware Cloud Director 10.2 is with vSphere version 7 update 2. So we are using specific capabilities for tenant isolation starting update 1C. So it's better to use the latest, which is vSphere 7 U2. And for CSE and TKGM, we can start using, start right from vSphere 7U3. And multi-tenancy, if we look at it, CSE uses all the components that is local to customer's organization, which is same as TKGM. Like even TKGM uses the same components, storage and networking from the customer organization, whereas TKGS is using Supervisor Cluster, which has a pool of ingress, egress, and different workload networks. So it's going to use that same pool of IPs, so IP pools. So we are going to provide network isolation through VMware Cloud Director. That is the major enhancement that is introduced in release 10.2.2, which we'll look at in detail.
Yeah, that's really important. So, so what it seems to me like is if you're a service provider and you've got some slightly older versions like 6.7U3 and you want to do TKG, you would need to use something like TKGM, but then the benefit of doing that is you don't have to worry about the network isolation because it's going to be kind of inherited with what you're using already. Whereas if you're using TKGS, this is going to require you to configure NAT and firewall routing and firewall rules, sorry, to enable that isolation for each tenant org.
For TKGS, we are VCD is taking care of those, but the only thing is we won't be able to provide same. For example, network level multi-tenancy will be limited, as in we are using same pool, but it will be isolated, secured for each tenant.
Got it.
So just to cover, TKGS support started with VCD release 10.2. And these are the minimum versions that we started with. ESXi and vSphere are at MP3 version, and NSXT as 3.0. And all the other documentation is available today about tenant and customer onboarding. It's fairly easy once the workload management is enabled on the vSphere infrastructure. It's very easy to integrate within VCD, as we don't install CSE server, and tenant onboarding is taking like just a couple of steps by publishing the rights bundle, enabling the UI plugin, and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yep. And just to cover what we are doing for TKGS integration, over here we can see that we use flex model first of all with starting 10.2, and for TKGS based clusters of our customer organization, we can have a dedicated pool of resource, which is called Kubernetes policy, which in turn is translated to a namespace on the vSphere infrastructure. So we can provide resource allocation dedicated to VM-based apps versus Kubernetes cluster apps. And this is the network isolation piece we were talking about. So what we are doing today is that first is we will first of all allow all the tenant workloads, VM-based workloads, to have access to the Kubernetes clusters within their organization. And we will block everything else that's coming into the step 2 is to block anything that's coming into the Kubernetes cluster from outside the organization. And then we can provide additional whitelisting rules on the gateway firewall in case we need. So
okay, so you're using some NAT then from the tier 1 gateway, which is attached, all of the VMs are attached to that, being the source to the supervisor ingress CEDA.
Yeah.
And then, all right, that's fine. And then you're basically just denying east-west traffic.
Yes. Other than all the tier 1 gateways of the workload management, we are not allowing any other ingress traffic. So what happens is that a supervisor cluster can go and provision the Kubernetes cluster when customer is requesting one, but we won't provide any additional access from any other organization. So and these rules are created and managed by VCD. So what happens is these rules will live with the Kubernetes cluster and policy. Once you delete those policies, these life cycle of these rules will be going with those constructs. So if you are deleting a policy, these rules will be deleted automatically. And as and when you add new policies, these rules will be updated as well. So we are ensuring that the cluster access to the cluster is secured at each point of the way when the provider is creating new customers. These rules are created with VCD itself. So we should not, even if we modify these rules upon new synchronization with the vSphere, these rules are going to be updated. So these rules are not supposed to be managed by provider or tenant admin. These are self-managed rules.
Okay, and they're created when you create the Kubernetes, or you enable the Kubernetes cluster?
When we create the namespace, or we create the namespace.
Okay, and they're created automatically then, so there's nothing.
Yes.
Okay, so right, so in terms of setup, there is nothing that needs to be done by the provider in this scenario.
That is correct.
Okay, got it. Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So it gives us, you're absolutely right, it gives us tenant isolation. It doesn't give us multi-tenancy.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It's a pretty interesting architectural workaround here, and this is only applying to TKGS, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be a reason for wanting to use TKGS?
One is the very tightly coupled integration with VCD, where everything is managed through vSphere today. And once we set up everything, there is not much to do. Like, it's very easy to consume and provide service for the provider, customers. And the second is you can draw a line, you can do complete Kubernetes-as-a-service with this, wherein you can manage the life cycle using the Supervisor Cluster, and provision and manage the Kubernetes clusters through TKGS. Whereas TKGM and CSE based model is more like we configure and provide them the extension, and then customer can go ahead and manage the life cycle of the Kubernetes cluster. That's how I look at it.
Okay. So there's more value in the service provider having to do a bit of network isolation and getting the gains from then the cluster controls and lifecycle management in TKGS than there is in TKGM, where you get all the network isolation and multi-tenancy, but you don't get the same levels of cluster control.
Yeah, I mean, that will change over the period of time, but
sure,
it looks that way. The other thing is with TKGS currently, all the ingress load balancing configuration is managed by Supervisor Cluster itself. So we don't have to do any additional ingress load balancing configuration as well. So
okay, that's good.
When we create a Kubernetes cluster as a customer, all the configuration is handled by NSXT network NCP. So it's very seamless experience in terms of we don't have to go and create additional at least access for the Kubernetes cluster. I mean, you have to go and enable those like ingress service for your own service, but direct access to ingress is managed, and all the networking is taken care by WCP and NCP. So that way it's pretty seamless and good experience for the customers.
Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. And just a question here. So in this example, you've got tenant A, tenant B, and they've both got one org VDC with a tier 1 gateway attached to it. If they had multiple org VDCs, is VCD or vSphere going to do that configuration for them in terms of the firewall policies if they add another org VDC?
Yes, so each org VDC will have its own Kubernetes policy. In turn, it will have its own tier 1 gateway. So again, the configuration will kick in, and those rules will be created automatically.
Cool. And I think that's what you were going to dive into in the demo, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right.
Should
we switch to demo mode?
Yes. All right. So let's get started. I am logged into my vSphere infrastructure. I'll basically first of all show the workload management that I have created. And so here what we can see is I have enabled supervisor cluster, and then my control plane VMs are already deployed. So I'll show that over briefly. So I have my testbed cluster over here, and then you can see all the configurations over here. So basically there are two aspects to this. One is the management network of the supervisor cluster itself, and the second one is the workload network, where we are defining all the ingress and egress networks and what is the default pod and service sider. Now, as an enhancement in 10.2.2, customer can actually change this pod and service sider per Kubernetes cluster. So customer can have their own custom pod and service network per Kubernetes cluster. So which is kind of nice. And the other thing is when we created and then I'll also show the content library that we spoke about. So when we enable workload management, we also add a content library. And this information we get from VMware Tanzu documentation itself, where we just provide a subscription URL, and then we end up downloading all the OVFs that we have from, those are supported ones from the VMware. So we can see we have all the versions available from.
Okay, so you've got your content library pulled down from VMware. You've got all of the photon images there. You've got your hosts, your clusters, your supervisor control planes all configured, and the namespaces have all got seeders assigned to them. All right, so you're in a good place.
Yep. And we just came up with a reference architecture in last month, where we defined, like, if the customer is using VRF today for multi-tenancy, we can actually provision 2 different clusters. So we can define those values from here. And then I'll quickly navigate to the reference architecture quickly. So this is the Cloud Solutions website that has all our documentation. And then this is the reference architecture we just published. So it talks about the overall design in detail, what will be the ingress and egress paths. And it talks about, like, how we can integrate VRF with TKGS based solution today. So basically we have two edge clusters, one for that's connecting to the internet gateway, and that is basically managing the VRFs, and the second one, that's the second edge cluster, and the first one is the main tier 0 gateway, which is connected to the internet. And then, like, this makes it easier for the provider in the sense that every time you have a new tenant organization, all you end up doing is just add additional VRF to edge cluster 2. So it becomes kind of modular and then easy to manage, and in terms of tenant onboarding.
And that's on cloudsolutions.vmware.com under resources. I think it's under reference architectures.
Yeah, it's under resource in the architecture, and then reference architectures. So we reviewed the vSphere infrastructure. Now we will look at the VMware Cloud Director. So over here, I can see I have, for the demo purpose, I have created two customer organizations, and I have connected my vSphere infrastructure as IS, and both my organizations are having its VDCs in a flex model, and in the flex model, and then I have already published the Kubernetes policy to my each customer or VDC. And now we'll see how, now we'll see the UI plugin that I was talking about. So the way we can see, like as a provider administrator, I'm going to see all the Kubernetes clusters that is present in all my customers' organization. So here I have 2 Kubernetes clusters running in organization 1 and 2. And the same goes for the tenant user as well. So let's quickly look at it from the tenant point of view. So as a tenant user, I have a single Kubernetes cluster that's running in my organization. So UI plugin allows these operations, basically resizing, getting the configuration, creating new cluster, etc. So over here, you can see I have deployed a Kubernetes cluster already, and it is getting an API endpoint, which is nothing but the ingress to this Kubernetes cluster. This is coming from the pool that we have defined on the supervisor cluster. And if you would like to see the rules on the NSX manager that our new network isolation has provided us, we'll quickly look at those. So as soon as we create, so and this is my NSXT manager, which is connected to my which is being used with vSphere and VCD today in my environment. And I have one tier 0 gateway, which is connected to the internet gateway. And I mainly wanted to show you the gateway policy. So we saw we have one organization, we have 2 organizations, and we created 2 Kubernetes policy, one for each. So we can see those over here. And then when we created the Kubernetes policy, these rules were inserted to those gateway by design.
So the local gateway there is to allow local VMs within the org VDC to access that Kubernetes namespace.
Yes.
And then the default one is going to be to disallow anything else from any other org. Got it.
Exactly. And also, if we see the NAT rules, like we saw in the diagram earlier, so we are navigating to the same organization 1's tier 1 gateway. We have that SNAT rule in place over here, that anything that goes out will be using that IP from that pool.
Got it.
Right.
And that's brilliant. So that's all completely automatic. So a provider actually doesn't need to worry about this at all.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And even if by accident, if somebody's messing up the rules on the next synchronization, this will be updated. For example, when we are reconnecting the vSphere to VCD, or when we are recreating the namespace for the customer organization, these rules will be created again.
Okay.
So now after we have provided this network isolation, now we have to make sure that we only access those from within the organization. So to access these Kubernetes clusters, we actually have to log into a jump host. So I have, where is that? Yeah. In this organization, I've already created a jump host machine, so through which I can go and access these Kubernetes cluster that we have in this organization. So let's try and look at it. So I have, okay, never mind. Let's find the ingress IP, right? So, and then I'm logged into my jump host already over here. And then let's see if we can access this. Yes, we can. But without this jump host, I should not be able to access this. So let's try to ping the other Kubernetes cluster from the organization too. That will give us an idea like this works, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we navigate to organization 2 and we get its. Okay.
So that jump host could just be a VM in that org1, right? It's nothing special about it. Yeah.
There is nothing special about it. It's just that we have to have a access on the level of external network. It's connected to the external network. That's all. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we follow the same workflow where we create a NAT rule if we are using the routed network. That's all.
Yeah.
And then this is the Kubernetes cluster 2 from the organization 2, and we can see we cannot. The ping doesn't go through.
Perfect. There is your network isolation.
Yep.
There is your security automatically applied for you.
Yes. So provider or tenant admin, they don't have to do anything additional to achieve this step.
It's brilliant. That's brilliant. Sashi, that's been fantastic. I think we've covered it in quite a lot of detail now. So I'm fully understanding at last. CSE, Tanzu, Kubernetes Grid, for vSphere and for multi-cloud. I understand the differences now, so thank you very much for working through those and explaining those to me. And this new update with network isolation is gonna, obviously for multi-tenanted Cloud Director environments, it's mandatory, right? I mean, we haven't been able to use this until now, so this is really good news to see this feature there.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you?
We also announced that Tanzu Mission Control is also available for our all partners. So as a standalone service, so you can use Tanzu Mission Control to manage these Kubernetes clusters which are deployed through VMware Cloud Director by customers. So you can follow the same workflow, create a YAML file that TMC provides for an extension, use it as a simple command through the jump host, and you can start managing through the Tanzu Mission Control. We have a couple of demonstration on that as well. So it's becoming easier to use TKG clusters with VMware Cloud Director.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Maybe we'll do another session on Tanzu Mission Control, because that's also new to me. I have never actually delved into it yet, so sure. I'd like to see that.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sashi. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for taking the time and showing us around. Brilliant.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.